Good morning, everyone. Uh, the topic for today's seminar is genetics of chronic pancreatitis. Where are we? And Sarai sir is my preceptor. So before we go into the genetics of chronic pancreatitis, let's see what are the problems with the current definition of chronic pancreatitis. In 1984, in order for diagnosis of chronic pancreatitis, Cambridge classification was introduced, and at the same time, CP was defined as the continuing inflammatory disease of the pancreas, characterized by irreversible morphological change, that is fibrosis, and typically causing pain and/or permanent loss of function. So, what is the problem with this definition? So here, fibrosis is taken as a minimum requirement for diagnosis of chronic pancreatitis, and since it is difficult to obtain the pancreatic tissue, imaging surrogates of fibrosis were used, and ERCP EUS criteria were established for diagnosis of chronic pancreatitis. Now, this is being used for the last 20-30 years, but here the time between the onset of symptoms and diagnosis of chronic pancreatitis usually takes around 5 to 10 years, and the diagnosis of CP is usually delayed. In this meanwhile, the patient continues to have recurrent episodes of pancreatitis and pain, and usually undergoes multiple costly investigations to reach the diagnosis. And second thing, once the diagnosis is established, we really cannot predict who will develop which complications, and fibrosis on imaging does not correlate with the exocrine or endocrine complications or even the local complications. And we usually end up treating the complications and only providing replacement therapy and symptomatic treatment. So we are not really changing the course of the disease or not targeting the underlying disease mechanism. So even after many years of research, in 1995, CP was considered that it still remains as an enigmatic process of uncertain pathogenesis, unpredictable clinical course, and unclear treatment. But a uh, new perspective was established in 1996 when the first mutation, PRSS1 gene mutation, was discovered in pancreatitis, and it is established as a cause for recurrent acute pancreatitis and chronic pancreatitis by Whitcomb et al. in 1996. Subsequently, we can see that the number of publications in chronic pancreatitis and genetics has increased tremendously and has made significant progress in the last 2 decades. So now that we have understood the problems with the current definition, a newer mechanistic definition was proposed by international consensus group, which tries to focus on early diagnosis of chronic pancreatitis, and also tries to provide a framework for diagnosis of early chronic pancreatitis. In this, there are 5 stages of chronic pancreatitis described, wherein in the first stage, the persons who are at risk, maybe due to his genetic risk factors or environmental risk factors, he has the risk factors, but yet has not developed any pancreatic injury. He is asymptomatic and has normal histology. Whenever there is an injury, that is the first injury insult, then he develops acute pancreatitis. It is called the first episode of acute pancreatitis or sentinel acute pancreatitis event, or SAPE. And this patient subsequently will develop recurrent episodes of acute pancreatitis, and the risk of development of recurrent acute pancreatitis and chronic pancreatitis depends on his genetic and environmental risk factors and persistence or avoidance. So whether the normal injury resolution regeneration sequence is whether there is a normal or abnormal response to this injury resolution cycle, that determines whether the patient will go into chronic pancreatitis or will go into resolution phase. So a new phase called early chronic pancreatitis was given as a third stage. However, we do not have any at this stage, we are not able to diagnose early chronic pancreatitis with imaging alone, and biomarkers are being developed to diagnose early chronic pancreatitis. So here there are only minimal CP features. Subsequently, the patient will develop established and end-stage chronic pancreatitis. This is where they have tried to show the five mechanistic reasons behind all the end-stage complications, like immune dysregulation and persistent pathological inflammation in the pancreas leads to activation of pancreatic stellate cells, leading to fibrosis or sclerosis. Acinar cell dysfunction leading to exocrine insufficiency, islet cell dysfunction leading to endocrine insufficiency, and pathological pain. There are two or three mechanisms of pain. We're not going into the details that leading into the pain syndrome. And patients with chronic pancreatitis are also at increased risk of malignancy. So these are the 5 stages, and this is called as a progressive model. And here they've tried to establish the spectrum, which is a continuum, and target. As of now, we are only providing symptomatic and supportive treatment. So this stage should set a framework to develop new precision precision therapeutics, which will reverse the patients from established CP to regeneration and help in fibrosis resolution. So the mechanistic definition says that chronic pancreatitis is a pathologic fibroinflammatory syndrome of pancreas in individuals with genetic, environmental, and other risk factors who develop persistent pathological responses to parenchymal injury or stress. So here the addition is the genetic, environmental, and risk factors, where stress is made to identify the multiple risk factors and try to remove those risk factors so that the patient does not develop subsequent episodes. So in addition, the continuation of the definition includes the common features of established and advanced CP, like atrophy, fibrosis, duct distortion, dilatation, calcification, pain syndromes, exocrine endocrine dysfunction, and dysplasia. So these are supposed to serve as a foundation for future work on reaching a new diagnostic criteria so that we diagnose early CP. So the classification, what is the difference between hereditary pancreatitis and familial pancreatitis? Often the distinction is arbitrary and many authors use the terms interchangeably. However, the term hereditary pancreatitis is strictly to be used only when the patient meets the criteria, HP criteria, that is the 3 or more affected members involving at least 2 generations. So when we work up a patient with chronic pancreatitis, we don't find any obvious precipitating cause like alcohol, trauma, medication, infection, or metabolic disorders like hypercalcemia and hypertriglyceridemia. Then we label, and if the patient does not have any family history, we label the patient as idiopathic chronic pancreatitis. If the patient has a family history, and if the patient has fulfilled the criteria of 3 members involving at least 2 generations, then we call him case of hereditary pancreatitis. And if the patient does not fulfill that but has a family history, it is familial chronic pancreatitis. Here, there is significant overlap, and this just shows the degree of penetrance is reducing from here to idiopathic chronic pancreatitis. Even patients with idiopathic chronic pancreatitis have few genetic risk factors, but their penetrance means that the patient, how many number of patients with this mutation express the disease. So although these patients have mutations,
Can't switch off your mic. Srikanth, go ahead.
Sir, hereditary pancreatitis is mostly caused by PRSS1 mutation, which is inherited as an autosomal dominant pattern, and it has a highest penetrance of 80%, meaning that 8 out of 10 patients with PRSS1 mutation and hereditary pancreatitis go on to develop manifest disease, whereas 2 out of 10 patients remain silent even though they have the gene. Whereas in patients with idiopathic chronic pancreatitis, it is observed that they have mutations which have the potential to which have less potential to express in patients. So before we go into the individual genes and mechanisms, I just want to touch upon the Tigaro classification that was first proposed in 2001, where the etiological risk factors were enumerated. Subsequently, it underwent revision after 2 decades in 2019, and here we would like to focus only on the genetic classification, how they have classified the individual risk factors into 5 or 6 groups. And Tigaro, the main difference is that there are patient can with CP can have multiple risk factors, and it is essential that we document all the risk factors, whether the patient has how many of them, and target each one of them. So first, they've classified patients with Mendelian inheritance. Mendelian inheritance, it can either be autosomal dominant or autosomal recessive. And in autosomal dominant, as we discussed, the most important PRSS1 mutation with hereditary pancreatitis and carboxyluster lipase mutation with MOD8 phenotype. In autosomal recessive, we have cystic fibrosis or cystic fibrosis related disease. The difference is whether they have 2 severe variants or less than 2 severe variants in trans configuration. And some patients with SPINK with 2 pathogenic variants in trans configuration also follow autosomal recessive inheritance pattern. And apart from these 2 defined inheritance patterns, which we know, there are complex genetics where they do not follow these inheritance pattern, but do have pathogenic variants which are responsible, which are considered as a primary mechanism for disease, like calcium sensing receptor variants and carboxyethyl lipase variants, CFTR variants, which are not severe enough to cause cystic fibrosis or related disease. They are also listed here. And chymotrypsin C related variants. All these variants we are going to discuss subsequently. So we are just looking at how they are classified, and then we'll go into the details. There are also some modifier genes where they are not individually responsible for causing the disease, but they can increase the susceptibility of the patient to disease, like Claudin2 gene mutation, SLC26A9 gene mutation, and GGT. So hypertriglyceridemia we know as a cause for pancreatitis, and the hereditary causes of hypertriglyceridemia are listed here, like lipoprotein lipase deficiency, apolipoprotein C3 deficiency. And there are some rare genetic syndromes where there is non-neoplastic pancreatic genetic variant associated syndromes, like Schwackman-Diamond syndrome and others, which are very rare. So before we go into the individual genes, so the functional unit of pancreas is the exocrine pancreas is the acinus and the duct. So acinus is responsible for secreting the digestive peptides. They secrete it in the form of zymogen granules into the lumen and in an inactive form, and they are flushed by the secretory products of the ductules, which secrete water and a large amount of bicarbonate, which flush the digestive enzymes into the duodenum. So we saw in Tigaro a different perspective of classification. Another way of looking at the classifying the genes is whether the genes confer increased acinar risk or ductal risk. So these are the risk factors which are attributed to the acini, where hypercalcemia and hyperstimulation due to alcohol are risk factors, and in genetic factors, PRSS1 and unfolded protein response. We'll be discussing what is unfolded protein response and all this. So this is trypsinogen, and CTRC and SPINK1 are localized to acinus. And coming to duct risk factors, we know that whenever there is an anatomical obstruction of the duct, that is a risk factor for pancreatitis, like duct obstruction because of protein plugs or mucus in IPMN, gallstones, obstructing tumors, strictures, or pancreatic division can act as a precedent for pancreatitis. Apart from that, there are some genetic mutations which result in reduced secretions, reduced water and bicarbonate secretion that results in increased viscosity of pancreatic fluid and leading to formation of calcium flux that also increase the risk of pancreatitis. So now let's go into the individual genes. Before discussing individual genes, we can classify them into three different pathways, three most important pathways. One is the trypsin dependent pathway, where we see that some of the genes, gene mutation result in premature intrapancreatic trypsinogen activation. So here there is pancreatic autodigestion, and second is misfolding dependent pathway, where normal protein folding does not occur and all these misfolding proteins get aggregated in the acinar cell that leads to acinar cell damage. Third is the duct cell related pancreatitis mechanisms, where the fluid and bicarbonate secretion is reduced, leading to increased viscosity and ductal obstruction. So these are the three important mechanisms, and we'll be discussing in the same sequence. First is the trypsin dependent pathway. So whenever acinar cell is stimulated by the acetylcholine or cholecystokinin, the rough endoplasmic reticulum synthesizes the digestive enzymes, which are proteins, which are packaged in the Golgi apparatus into zymogen granules, and these are released into the duct lumen. So once all the pancreatic zymogens enzymes are released into the pancreatic duct, they go into the duodenum, and here the brush border enterokinase cleaves the inactive trypsinogen activation peptide and facilitates conversion of trypsinogen to trypsin. This trypsin, active trypsin, helps in activation of trypsinogen and also other proenzymes, leading to digestive process of the nutrients. So this is the normal sequence. So these enzymes are secreted in inactive zymogen forms, and these enzymes, if activated prematurely within the pancreas, can lead to autodigestion of the pancreatic tissue. Normally and physiologically, this in pancreatic digestion by their own enzymes is prevented, because we saw that the zymogens are made in inactive forms, and we also saw that the enzymes are packaged in zymogen granules, and there is also geographical separation of the site of release and the site of activation. Where in duodenum, where the pH bicarbonate has reduces the pH and there is brush border enterokinase, only there it gets activated. Before that, it usually does not get activated. And in inflammation, even if the enzyme trypsinogen gets activated within the pancreas, the zymogen granule also has a suicide inhibitor or a trypsin inhibitor, which is co-packaged along with it, which acts as a defense. We will go into the details of it. So among the pancreatic juice proteins, around 30% is contributed, 30% is the trypsinogen enzyme itself, which is the most abundant enzyme. And among the trypsinogen, there are two isoforms, cationic and anionic. Cationic is the most important, contributing to around 60% of all the 60 to 70% of all the trypsinogen. And this cationic trypsinogen is coded by PRSS1 and anionic is coded by PRSS2. Mesotrypsinogen is not very important, and both PRSS1 and PRSS2 genes are located on chromosome 7, and cationic trypsinogen protein consists of two globular domains, and there is a trypsinogen activation peptide, which after cleavage of this peptide by enterokinase or low pH, the trypsinogen will get activated into trypsin. Another important thing is that the trypsinogen molecule has two calcium binding proteins, where whether the trypsin molecule activates the trypsinogen or inactivates the trypsinogen depends on the calcium concentration. In high intracinar calcium concentration, the trypsin in high calcium concentration, the trypsin gets activated, and in low concentration, trypsin inactivates the trypsinogen. So if there is any confusion, we'll just recapitulate. So the inactive trypsinogen getting converted into trypsin because of the intropeptidase in the duodenum. This will act as an activator of all the other digestive proenzymes like chymotrypsinogen, procarboxypeptidase, and phospholipase. All these enzymes are activated, and this leads to normal food digestion within the intestine. Now, what happens in pathology? In case the trypsinogen is prematurely activated uh, before it reaches the duodenum or within the pancreas, then this is prevented by two guardian angels, CTRC or chymotrypsin C and SPINK1. These two proteins inhibit the conversion of active trypsin to trypsinogen when there is autoactivation. Also, as I said, the trypsin not only autoactivates the trypsinogen at high calcium concentrations, but also inhibit the autoactivation in low calcium concentration. So when this mechanism is affected, when there are gain of function mutations of PRSS or cationic trypsinogen, there is more of trypsin generation. When there is loss of function mutation of these defense mechanisms like chymotrypsin C or SPINK1, there is again increased trypsin available for autodigestion. So when premature activation happens of trypsin or there is more concentration, it activates the digestive enzymes within the pancreas itself, leading to pancreatic autodigestion. So prematurely activated trypsin, if not inhibited or inactivated, leads to activation cascade of all other digestive enzymes within the pancreas, leading to autodigestion. Calcium switch, as I said, trypsinogen is activated by trypsin in high intracellular calcium concentration. Now coming to the first gene, PRSS1 gene codes for cationic trypsinogen. So mutation gain of function mutations in PRSS1 gene results in trypsinogen activation independent of calcium concentration, and this leads to hereditary pancreatitis, which follows an autosomal dominant inheritance pattern. And as I mentioned earlier, it has very high penetrance of almost 80%. The most common mutations are R122H and N291 are responsible for these are the pathological variants, and these are responsible for most of the PRSS1 gene mutations. And these three genes combined contribute to around 90% of hereditary pancreatitis cases. However, PRSS1 mutations we do not see in our Indian chronic pancreatitis patients, and usually it is found, it is seen in the Western and European families. And in contrast to PRSS1, there are no gain of function mutations of anionic trypsinogen coded by PRSS2. So these PRSS2 variants, there are no gain of function mutations identified. However, the loss of function of PRSS1 and 2 both can provide protection against chronic pancreatitis. So when there is less amount of trypsinogen, the chance of pancreatitis is also less, and the protection odds ratio is around 1.5. And this protective action of loss of function mutations was more pronounced in alcoholic chronic pancreatitis.
Syed, please switch off your mic.
So coming to the second gene in this trypsinogen activation pathway, we know, so we discussed that there are two lines of defense against prematurely activated trypsin. So the first and the most important line of defense is the pancreatic secretory trypsin inhibitor, or SPINK1. So this is also synthesized by acinar cells, and it is co-packaged in the zymogen granule itself. And when activated, it can trap up to 20% of the active trypsin. And this is a suicide inhibitor and is the most important first line of defense against prematurely activated trypsin. So the secretion of SPINK1 is independent of secretion of trypsinogen. So trypsinogen, there is constant release of enzyme, and SPINK1 in under physiological circumstances, there is very low expression of SPINK1. So there is very less inhibitory potential, and that leads to increased trypsinogen and secretion of active trypsin. But in conditions where there is increased inflammation like pancreatitis, SPINK1 is an acute phase reactant where the blood concentration increases in during acute inflammation. So the expression of SPINK1 increases, and the activation of the prematurely activated trypsin during inflammation is inhibited. And P9N34S is the most common variant, and the loss of function of this SPINK1 results in reduced inhibition of prematurely activated trypsin, and of an odds ratio of around 9 to 11. The frequency of this pathological variant was found to be in 9.7, around 10% in chronic pancreatitis versus 1% in controls in a meta-analysis. And this is the most significant risk factor. And there is also gene environment interaction. Here we can see that the odds ratio, the severity of this effect is increased in patients with tropical chronic pancreatitis harboring this mutation when compared to idiopathic, which is even more than alcoholic patients. So the effect of SPINK1 is more pronounced in patients with tropical and idiopathic chronic pancreatitis. When compared to PRSS1, which has 80% penetrance, this SPINK1 has intermediate penetrance, which is less than PRSS1. So coming to the third and the final gene of trypsinogen activation pathway, this is the second line of defense. This function of this is just similar to SPINK1, and this is chymotrypsinogen C, and just like SPINK1, loss of function mutation here again results in reduced protection, and this was found in around 4% of patients with non-alcoholic chronic pancreatitis, and it conferred 5 times higher risk of chronic pancreatitis, and when compared to SPINK1, it has an even lower penetrance. And Indian patients with chronic pancreatitis, we found that there were around 14 variants, and it was occurring at a frequency of 12.2% when compared to 3.7% in the controls. And in India, the pathological variant is V235Y, in contrast to the Western population where K247 or R254 deletion is the most common variant. And what they in Indian study, they've seen that whether the patients with SPINK positive or negative, whether it is SPINK positive already having a SPINK mutation or they do not have SPINK mutation, the frequency of CTRC or chymotrypsin mutation is almost similar in both the groups. Similarly, in both cathepsin positive and cathepsin negative, the frequency of chymotrypsin is same. So there was no much genetic interaction between chymotrypsin and SPINK1 or cathepsin gene. And in gene environment interaction, we see that this mutation is found more associated with smoking rather than alcoholism. So to summarize the trypsinogen activation pathway, pancreatitis, this is the most oldest described pathway and most important pathway. And this considers that the pancreatitis is an autodigestive disease, and the trypsinogen has the ability for autoactivation, and prematurely activated trypsin, if not controlled or inhibited, can lead to pancreatitis. And there are a series of defense mechanisms that are evolved to prevent this, that is SPINK1 and CTRC. And the 3 genes which are classified based on the penetrance and relative importance are PRSS1, high penetrance, and this is the central player, SPINK1 of intermediate penetrance and first line defense, CTRC of low penetrance. So coming to the second pathway, misfolding dependent pathway. So all the digestive enzymes are basically proteins. So they are synthesized by the ribosomes, and the proteins which are synthesized, there are specialized proteins called chaperones, which ensure that these proteins are properly folded and they go into the right subcellular compartments. And in case by chance there is misfolding of proteins, these are degraded by ubiquitin proteasome system. So the chaperones and ubiquitin protein system help ensure that normal protein folding and enzyme secretion occurs. When there are mutations affecting this ubiquitin proteasome, chaperone, or protein folding pathway, then that leads to misfolding, increased misfolding of proteins, and these misfolded proteins aggregate within the endoplasmic reticulum, and they lead to endoplasmic reticulum stress, and that leads to acinar cell damage and pancreatitis. So this is how misfolding of digestive proteins lead to acinar cell injury. This is an alternate pathomechanism seemingly unrelated to trypsinogen activation pathway. So misfolded digestive enzymes, there are increasing number of case reports being reported suggesting misfolding pathway as the cause for pancreatitis, and the mutations have misfolded mutations have been found in PRSS1 gene, CTRC1, carboxyester lipase gene, carboxy peptidase A1 gene, pancreatic triglyceride lipase gene, and some other digestive enzymes also. This pathway is of lesser importance, and the mutations are rare and mostly associated with sporadic disease. So apart from the PRSS1 mutation leading to hereditary pancreatitis, the misfolding associated mutations are rare, and these are the mutations reported. And in East Asia, G208A is reported from Japanese studies, where they found in 4% of chronic pancreatitis patients. So next important gene in misfolding pathway is the carboxypeptidase A1 mutation, where the chronic pancreatitis risk is increased to the tune of 25 times. And this was found especially in patients with early onset chronic pancreatitis, where age of onset is less than 10 years. And they were and then study they were found in 5 patients out of 230 patients tested for misfolding associated CPA1 mutation, and none were found among the same number of controls. And a carboxyester lipase is responsible for digestion of fats and fat soluble vitamins in the duodenum, and misfolding associated CGL mutations, and also there is hybrid carboxyester lipase and its adjacent carboxyester lipase pseudo gene. They form a dimer and result in chimeric protein that results in reduced secretion of normal carboxyester lipase. So this mutation, there are single base pair deletions, and these result in a exocrine and endocrine syndrome called MODY8, or the maturity onset diabetes of young. This phenotype is characterized by exocrine reduced fecal elastase and pancreatic lipomatosis, usually less than 20 years of age, followed by diabetes and pancreatic cysts in adulthood. So in European population, these were found to be higher among idiopathic chronic pancreatitis to the tune of 5 times. And these were tested in 3 Asian populations. However, they were not found. So we have discussed trypsinogen activation pathway and misfolding dependent pathway. Now let's discuss the duct cell related pancreatitis mechanisms. So we know just like cholecystokinin stimulates the acinar cells to release the zymogens or digestive enzyme, secretin stimulation of the ductular cells results in secretion of water as well as bicarbonate. Now the function is to dilute the pancreatic secretions and flush the digestive enzymes into the duodenum. Not just enzyme delivery, but the function of duct cells is also to secrete large volumes of bicarbonate, which neutralizes the gastric acid, and it also helps in feedback inhibition of pancreatic stimulation, and maintain alkaline pH in the duct which prevent trypsinogen activation prematurely within the pancreas. So whenever there is a duct obstruction, as we discussed, all these causes of duct obstruction will increase the risk of pancreatitis, and also these genetic mutations also, as I said, decrease the secretion, increase the viscosity, and increase the risk of pancreatitis. How these mutations increase the risk of pancreatitis, we are going to see in the subsequent slides. So if we look at the enhanced view of each ductular cell and the channels which are responsible for bicarbonate secretion in ductular cells, primarily the sodium bicarbonate is pulled from the basolateral membrane into the cell through sodium bicarbonate exchanger, and this sodium gradient is maintained with sodium potassium pump, and the electrochemical gradient is maintained by the potassium channel. So now these three, function of all these three together is just to pull the bicarbonate into the cell. Now that we have the bicarbonate within the ductular cell, the CFTR, whenever the duct cell is activated by secretin or other stimuli, CFTR channel opens, and this bicarbonate which has reached the inside of the cell now goes into the lumen. And since the intracellular charge is usually negative, the ion flux initially is from within the cell into the lumen of bicarbonate. So now here the negative charge is increased. So in order to neutralize this, to maintain the electrochemical gradient, now the sodium also goes along the paracellular pathway. So how does this happen in the between the tight junctions? It is said that the Claudin 2 is replaced by Claudin 4, and this results in conductance of sodium. And along with now that we have bicarbonate and sodium in the duct tube, there is increased osmotic load, and this draws water along the paracellular pathway. This results in bicarbonate-rich fluid, which dilutes the zymogens and delivers it to the duodenum. So whenever this duct flushing mechanism fails, then both acute and chronic pancreatitis can be triggered, and trypsin is generated prematurely activated because there is increased viscosity and stasis, and other zymogens are activated, resulting in injury. So a simpler representation of this diagram, here we can see this is the CFTR channel, from which is a conductance channel for chloride and bicarbonate. However, it is mainly bicarbonate in the pancreatic duct, and calcium sensing, when there is high ductal concentration of calcium, it is sensed by calcium sensing receptor, which stimulates the CFTR channel to release more amount of bicarbonate. And similarly, SLC26AS A6 channel is a chloride bicarbonate exchanger, where chloride is exchanged for bicarbonate. So mutations in any of the three channels, genes encoding for any of the three carriers, will resulting in decreased secretion of bicarbonate can predispose to pancreatitis. So CFTR, CASR mutations are important, which result in impaired secretion of bicarbonate. So apart from this, the Claudin 2, we know that the Claudin 2 is normally replaced by Claudin 4, and then it allows the paracellular passage of water and sodium. So Claudin 2 variants or resulting in Claudin 2 mislocalization are also found to increase the risk of chronic pancreatitis. So coming to CFTR, it's a cyclic AMP regulated chloride bicarbonate channel. It is localized to the apical membrane of ductal cells, resulting in bicarbonate secretion. It dilutes and alkalinizes the protein-rich acinar secretions and prevent protein plug formation that predispose to pancreatic injury. So there are more than 2,000 mutations described in cystic fibrosis and CFTR protein, and the most severe of which is the F508 deletion, and the prevalence, this was calculated in patients with cystic fibrosis. And so this delta F508 deletion is the most severe form of CFTR mutations. Usually the 1, 2, and 3 classes of mutation result in severe reduced activity of CFTR, and class 4 and class 5 have less severe mutations and result in residual CFTR function more than 5%. So normal CFTR, there is conductance of ions. In mutated CFTR, either there is the number of channels is reduced, or the quality of the channel is reduced so that the ion flow is reduced. So they either disrupt the channel activity or affect the concentration of CFTR on the membrane. So as you said, what is the residual CFTR function in a patient with CFTR mutation is important. Why it is important? Because this is inversely proportional to the risk of pancreatitis. So we have cystic fibrosis and cystic fibrosis related disease. So this is related disease. What is the difference? So cystic fibrosis has two severe CFTR variants in class 1 or 1 to 3, resulting in residual CFTR activity of less than 2%. So this mutation is so severe that the fetus in utero can have severe damage, structural damage, because of autoactivation of because of extensive protein plug formation and autoactivation of enzymes and pancreatic digestion. There is structural damage to such an extent within the fetus itself that the patient does not have any exocrine tissue left. So when there is no when there is no enzyme left, so there is no risk of pancreatitis in these patients. And these have severe exocrine insufficiency and are kept on enzyme replacement throughout their life. And this is the only so this is the only known Mendelian genetic disorder of the duct cell. And the classical cystic fibrosis is this one, with the two severe CFTR variants. It presents with chronic obstructive airway disease, exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, and elevated sodium chloride in sweat gland. Whereas cystic fibrosis related disorders have milder mutations and complex genotypes of CFTR gene, and results in cystic fibrosis like illness in one or more organs. And these result in milder forms of cystic fibrosis, and usually present in later age of onset, and pancreatic sufficiency. Now this residual pancreatic sufficiency, there is repeated plaque formation and increased risk of pancreatitis. So there is risk of recurrent acute pancreatitis and chronic pancreatitis, congenital absence of the vas deferens, disseminated bronchiectasis, or sclerosing cholangitis. So this can be present in individually or in combination depending on the complex genotype of CFTR and its expression in different organs. So in chronic pancreatitis, they found that the abnormal CFTR alleles were twice the number of controls. And this led to association between CFTR alleles and chronic pancreatitis. So CFTR variants, there are some CFTR variants that affect only bicarbonate conductance, which is important in the pancreatic duct rather than the chloride conductance. And the North American pancreatitis study, they've tested for 984 variants with recurrent acute pancreatitis and chronic pancreatitis. And among the 81 variants of cystic fibrosis, they found that nine variants were not associated with typical cystic fibrosis, and they were associated with RAPCP. So these were not affecting the chloride channel. So normal chloride conductance and diminished bicarbonate conductance in animal studies with functional testing. So these are the patients, if you do sweat chloride testing, these are not going to be detected. So genetic analysis is necessary. So heterozygous pathogenic variants are common in populations of European ancestry, and parents of cystic fibrosis children, there is no increased incidence of acute pancreatitis. So this indicates that the carrier, even if there are CFTR mutation, it is not sufficient enough to cause pancreatitis alone. Because parents of cystic fibrosis children, there is no increased incidence, and there are heterozygous pathogenic variants are common in commonly found in populations. Here we saw even around 10% there are CFTR alleles. So whether they are pathogenic and are responsible for chronic pancreatitis, that needs to be established. Or because there is increased frequency in CP, there is a association, and it is suggested it is likely a cofactor, especially in early onset idiopathic pancreatitis, And second factors need to be identified that specifically targets the pancreas. So the second factor could be a genetic variant in the SPINK1, CTRC, or the CASR, calcium sensing receptor, which we discussed, or an anatomical factor like a pancreas divisum, or an environmental factor like alcohol, smoking, metabolic factor, or any other mechanism. So this is likely a cofactor CFTR. So calcium sensing receptor, I have told that this detection of calcium, intraductal calcium is detected by calcium sensing receptor. This stimulates the secretion of CFTR. So mutation in CASR will result in reduced secretion of bicarbonate from the CFTR. So this results in CASR mutations, and CASR regulates calcium homeostasis through parathyroid secretion and renal tubular calcium secretion. Increased calcium pancreatic tunes, I have told, results in increased ductal fluid secretion, thereby preventing stone formation in pancreatitis. So R990G polymorphism is found in CASR. It was found to be conferring 2 times higher risk of chronic pancreatitis to individuals, and it was found more commonly in patients with moderate to heavy alcohol consumption. This is a low risk susceptibility gene or a modifier gene and is incapable of causing pancreatitis individually. Claudin 2 also we have discussed the Claudin 2 mutations leading to mislocalization of Claudin results in chronic pancreatitis, and CLDN2 and MORC4 variants result in Claudin mislocalization and confers higher risk of chronic pancreatitis. So here so now we have completed the 3 pathways: the trypsinogen pathway, misfolding pathway, and the duct dependent pathway. So now we have discussed the individual genes. So we understood that there is also overlap between the genetic mutations, and each patient can have multiple genetic mutations that can increase the risk of chronic pancreatitis. Here we can see that when a patient has a CFTR mutation alone, that increases the CP risk by 40 times. And when there is SPINK1 mutation in 34S, there was increased risk of 14 times. But both these variants, whichever variant was causing 40 times higher risk, when both the variants were found in the same patients, they were found to confer a 500 times higher risk. So this shows that presence of 2 genes can lead to synergism and very heightened risk of chronic pancreatitis. So CP is a polygenic disease with multiple genetic risk factors as well as environmental factors. So not just gene interaction, but there are also multiple gene environment interactions. As I've touched upon how they have increased the more associated with smoking. Some mutations are more associated with smoking, some mutations are more associated with alcoholic, and some are less pronounced in alcoholics. So we see that although even if we take 100 patients of moderate to heavy alcohol consumers, only around 2 to 3% of them develop chronic pancreatitis, and majority never develop chronic pancreatitis. So what is the reason for that? So one of the explanation that is provided is that some of these patients have protective genes, like for example loss of function mutation of BRSS1, where there is reduced trypsinogen, hence reduced autodigestion. So less risk of pancreatitis. So this is one of the explanation provided. And there are risk factors which predispose to alcoholic CP also. For example, the SPINK1 N34S mutation was found in the frequency of 0.8% in healthy controls and around 1% in alcoholics without pancreatitis. But the same mutation was found around 6 times higher in patients with alcoholic chronic pancreatitis. So SPINK1 mutation confers 5 times higher risk of alcoholic chronic pancreatitis. CTRC gene similarly has shown to increase confers 3 times higher risk of alcoholic chronic pancreatitis. And CFTR mutation was not found to be increased among alcoholic CP compared to other CP. And PRSS1 mutation is not found in alcoholic CP. It is assumed that the high penetrance and severe mutation PRSS1 mutation they must have developed chronic pancreatitis and pain way in the childhood, and this will prevent them from developing alcohol consumption as a habit later on in the adolescence or adulthood. Not only gene-gene interactions, but there are also environment interactions, as we discussed, and both SPINK1 and CTRC1 variations were found more frequently in Indian patients with tropical chronic pancreatitis than in Caucasian patients. So in Indian patients, we have more prevalence of SPINK1 and CTRC gene mutations. And as I said, PRSS1 mutations are somehow not found in Indian patients with chronic pancreatitis. The reason of which is not clear, why we do not find patients with PRSS1 mutation. So not just the genotype, but expression of the having the genetic risk factor, but expression of the genetic genes and development of pancreatitis is also doubtful. We do not know who will manifest them. So it is a very complex relationship with multiple gene and gene environment interactions, and the penetrance of mutant trypsin depends on the effect of mutant on self-destruction and activity levels of the protective enzymes, that is PINK1 and CTRC. And even within each gene, different variants exhibit different degrees of penetrance. So it is very difficult to provide genetic counseling in such polygenic complex genetic disease model. So this is a graphical representation showing the contribution of different mutations. For example, PRSS1 is mostly found in hereditary pancreatitis, and into a few patients with familial chronic pancreatitis also have PRSS1. These patients do not have the HP criteria, and these are not found in other forms of pancreatitis. SPINK1 and CTRC, we have seen that they are found in almost all types of idiopathic and also familial chronic pancreatitis patients. CTRC is found to a lesser extent in familial and found in idiopathic and tropical and alcohol. CFTR gene variants were mostly tested in idiopathic chronic pancreatitis, and CASR mutations were found in idiopathic and tropical and alcohol. So now that we've discussed the individual genes and their interactions, what is the prevalence? If we look at a cohort, 3 groups, one from America, one from Europe, and one from India, if we take examples. So North American pancreatitis study, so they have tested 1,000 patients with recurrent acute pancreatitis and chronic pancreatitis. They found that alcohol was primarily responsible for CP in 15% of the patients, and hyperlipidemia 4%, obstructive causes 9%, and post necrotizing pancreatitis in 3%. So here we see that 24% of patients, they've attributed it to genetic etiology. And among this 24%, the most frequent in American population is the CFTR genetic variants, which the prevalence is 14%, the SPINK1 of 4%, PRSS 3%, and the combination of CFTR and SPINK1 is 3%. So despite despite testing the population for all the known mutations till the time of study, they found that 42% of the patients, they are not able to establish a cause. This tells us there are a lot of genes that are yet to be discovered, and a lot of disease mechanisms are yet to be found. So if you look at the European study with around 400 patients, they found that they also have a high prevalence of CFTR and SPINK1 gene mutation. And if you look at these are the typical variants, and most common is the CFTR and SPINK1, and these confer around 3 and 15-fold higher risk of CP. PRSS1, we know that it is the strongest risk factor, but it is found in around 4% of population. And the rest, CTRC, CEL, and CPA1 have less than 5% prevalence each. So coming to Indian data, we have AIMS data. So in patients with idiopathic chronic pancreatitis, and there are initially there was a misnomer of tropical chronic pancreatitis, which is now obsolete. So most of them which were attributed to diet and environmental factors are now found. Now we know that the genetics is the cause, not the diet or environmental factors. So patients with 113 patients with idiopathic chronic pancreatitis were tested for the common mutations found in the Western population, that CFTR, SPINK1 and PRSS1. These are the common variants. So Delta F508 is the severest, most severe form, and that results in typical classical cystic fibrosis. So these mutations were found only in 3 patients out of 113 patients, and it was similar to the number of control patients also. However, there are a lot of other CFTR milder variants, class 3, class 4 variants, and complex genotypes. They were found to be increased in patients with idiopathic chronic pancreatitis, almost to the tune of 50% of the patients had CFTR mutations in Indian patients with idiopathic chronic pancreatitis, when compared to only 10% in the controls. And similarly, the common N34S, which is found in the Western population, the same variant is found to the tune of around 50% again in ICP, when compared to only 4% in the controls. So SPINK1 and CFTR are the most important genetic risk factors, and they are found in more than 50% of patients with idiopathic chronic pancreatitis in Indian population. So they found that these cohort, the etiological profile was similar to the Western cohort, but they had good prognosis with pain relief and survival. Subsequently, there is a multicenter study from AIMS PGI and SGPG and CMC, where 500 Indian patients with chronic pancreatitis were taken, where 83% of them were idiopathic, and they found that they have tested these patients for new mutations like Claudin2 and MORC4 genes, and they found there is significant association with odds ratio of 1.7, and they showed gene dosage effect in these mutations. And there was a significant interaction with alcohol also, where the odds ratio increased 14 times in patients with alcoholic CP when compared to non-alcoholic CP. So coming to sir,
we have already 9 o'clock.
Sir, last 2 slides, sir, just 2 minutes, 5 minutes. So there are a lot of problems with genetic testing that. So now, even if you do genetic testing and found that there are some mutations, how do we know that these are the mutations which are responsible for causing CP? So that is difficult to establish. And even if we establish some mutations, what are we going to offer to the patient? So that is an area of debate. However, if you look at the recommendations, genetic analysis in patients with familial chronic pancreatitis is suggested in patients with if there is a family history of ICP, RAP, or childhood pancreatitis, or when when we have patients with relatives with known mutations associated with hereditary pancreatitis, or in a child where the cause is unexplained, or patients with less than 25 years. We usually suggest genetic analysis. This was suggested by the Western literature, and there was a recent international consensus guideline where in all patients with idiopathic disease, they suggest that full sequence analysis of CFTR, CPA1, CTRC, PRSS, and SPINK1 gene along with the CEL gene pathogenic hybrid allele is recommended. But how many follow this recommendation is not known. And implications, there are only theoretical implications. We can stop etiological evaluation once we found the genetic cause, and we can also prognosticate because SPINK1 variants are known to have more rapid progression. And there are some therapeutic implications, like we know that for cystic fibrosis, there are gene modifiers like amplifiers which increase the immature CFTR protein, correctors which process the mutated protein and increase delivery, and there are also potentiators which increase the opening time of CFTR. So cystic fibrosis, which was once considered a genetic disease with no drugs, now having a lot of trials on these CFTR modulators, resulting in improved outcomes. So this can be applied to cystic chronic pancreatitis patients with cystic with genetic mutations. There was only one case series I found. This is the last slide. There was a case series of 6 patients where they found patients with cystic fibrosis who had more than one episode of pancreatitis in the last 1 year. So we can see that there were 5, 3, 1, 2, so many episodes of pancreatitis in the last 12 months. Once they have started on ivacaftor, they followed them up for 1 more year, and they saw how many number of episodes of pancreatitis have occurred. And they saw that only one patient developed in the first 3 months, and none of them developed in the subsequent 12 months after starting ivacaftor. So this can be a beginning for a new era of development of drugs which can modify the genetic defects. To summarize, CP is a complex disease with complex interactions between genetic and environmental factors, and only PRSS1 is capable of causing CP alone. Rest all are cofactors and act in concert with the environmental risk factors. We discussed the trypsinogen pathway, duct-dependent pathway, and the misfolding pathway. And genetic basis of large fraction of patients with CP still remains unexplained. So this is a database which maintains collects data from all the published reports of all the variants of important genes. So this is continuously updated.
Thank you, Jatin. So we need to understand the underlying pathophysiology in chronic pancreatitis. As explained by Jatin, there are 3 pathways: the trypsin-dependent pathway, misfolded pathway, and ductal physiology pathway. Why these are important? Because, for example, SPINK is involved in trypsinogen pathway, CFTR is involved in ductal physiology. SPINK mutation increases risk by 14 times, and CFTR mutation increases the risk by 20 times. When both trypsinogen pathway and ductal physiology they are added, the risk is exaggerated by nearly to 500 times. And also, the trypsinogen pathway genes are important in CP etiologies dependent on this trypsinogen pathway, like idiopathic chronic pancreatitis, and less in alcoholic pancreatitis, where it has multimodal, multifactorial etiology. So coming to how this genetics can be useful in chronic pancreatitis management, first one is genetic counseling, especially in etiologies following Mendelian inheritance, like hereditary pancreatitis or cystic fibrosis, which helps in family planning. And second is like in few cases, like pancreatic devism, the role of pancreatic devism in chronic pancreatitis, the role was controversial, but a study from our institute have shown that the genetic mutations in pancreatic devism is higher compared to control population, and the genetic mutations are similar to other idiopathic chronic pancreatitis. So with this study, we could establish that pancreatic devism is not a sole etiological factor. So in this way, these genetic analysis can be useful. But what are the limitations at this point of time? There is no definite therapeutic benefit with we get with genetic counseling in the current trend. So although in cystic fibrosis, there are there is a case series as shown by Jatin, where this ivacaftor decreased the risk of pancreatitis in cystic fibrosis. So, and second limitation of genetic analysis is the most of the idiopathic chronic pancreatitis are a complex genetic disorders which cannot be explained by few genes testing. And second point is also the commonly known variants are occur in less frequency, and the unknown variants are many. So only the recent international consensus on genetic testing in idiopathic chronic pancreatitis advised complete gene sequencing of the involved genes rather than few testing for few variants. So concluding it, with the era of precision medicine expanding and the cost of the complete genome sequencing decreasing, in future there will be a different important role of this genetic testing in idiopathic chronic pancreatitis diagnosis and management. Thank you. Now the house is open for discussion.
Slide sharing बंद करो.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. I might have missed it, but did you discuss the TRPV6 mutations that have been reported recently in chronic pancreatitis?
Sir, I've only discussed the most important and the most frequent mutation. There are many other mutations like GGT mutation, SLC26AS, and the TRP1. So these are all the mutations which I have not discussed because of time constraints, and I focus more on the most frequent and the most common ones.
Pramod, would you like to add something?
No, I just wanted to say that, first of all, I think it was a fairly exhaustive seminar. He covered most of the things. The major issue is that apart from hereditary pancreatitis, where you have CFTR mutation, then, in other cases, we don't know how much is the risk. So, for example, one of the important things that all the fellows should understand is that, if you have for example, SPINK1 mutation, which is seen, say, in India, about 40% of patients with CP, and in about 3% of general population, then it looks very high. OR is about 14 or something. For most other genes, the odds ratio of, having a disease is about 1.5 to 2. Maximum it has reached 2.5, 2.6 or something like that. So it is not very high. So in the case of SPINK1 also, if I give you some statistics, so you have, say, 2% of population in India having SPINK1 N34S mutation. That means 2,000 out of 100,000 people will have SPINK1 mutation. 2% of 100,000 population, 1 lakh population. If you look at the prevalence of chronic pancreatitis, you will find that it is in India, one of the highest is, say, 100 per 100,000. That means 1 in 1,000 has got chronic pancreatitis. Now, of those people who have, you feel that 40% will be because of SPINK1. So out of 2,000 people who have got SPINK1 mutation, only 1 will develop chronic pancreatitis in the lifetime. Those who have SPINK1 N34S mutation, 2,000 people, 2%, and prevalence is 1 in 1,000. So not more than 1% out of 2,000 will develop chronic pancreatitis. And this is for SPINK1, where your odds ratio is around 14, right? So this is a very, very important point, that just because of the presence of a genetic polymorphism doesn't necessarily mean that a patient will develop chronic pancreatitis. And that is the importance what Jatin was also referring to, gene-gene interaction and gene-environment interaction. And that is the reason why genetic testing may not be really very important, and it might actually cause other problems like, insurance problems, legal problems, sometimes social problems, familial problems, then, marriage counseling and other things coming. The advantage of doing genetic counseling is that if you show that there is some kind of mutation, it prevents a patient from undergoing multiple testing to find out the etiology. Otherwise, they will keep on doing MRCP and EUS and all kinds of testing, and sometimes patient will undergo cholecystectomy and multiple other tests. So if a patient comes to you with recurrent pancreatitis, likely early pancreatitis, and you show that there is a particular mutation, then people stop testing. So that is an advantage of doing this. But of course, you have to explain to the patient and relatives in detail that this doesn't really mean that, you can't do anything. You can still do a lot more things for the patients. I'll stop here.
Jatin,
Sir,
as stated by Garg sir, we are like in a premature stage to test the patients for genetic mutation right now. Suppose someone comes to you with a mutation done elsewhere, and you found that he or she has certain mutation, then how would you like to proceed in this patient? Because it might be in to look for other etiologies, but what should be your strategy going forward?
Sir, we are not very sure if this is the cause for the chronic pancreatitis, and we should try to reevaluate the patient for all other possible treatable etiologies, because having a genetic risk factors, we are currently not able to provide any therapeutic benefit to the patient. So we should look for any other missed etiological factor. I would like to screening for other etiologies again. And second thing, since it is not a monogenic disease following Mendelian pattern of inheritance, I'm not really able to provide genetic counseling. I do not know whether the patient will manifest or if how their children will manifest. So I'm not really able to provide a genetic counseling. I'm not able to provide a therapeutic benefit to the patient with any mutation. So I would rather not test the patients at this stage. Only benefit, as Garg sir said, is to stop unnecessary investigation and establish that this is a cause. So only that is the only thing which we are able to tell the patient that this is the cause and you should not undergo any further costly investigations. And apart from that, I really don't have anything much to offer to the patient at this stage. Maybe in future, when there are newer drugs developing which are able to modify, then I'm able to provide some advice.
Okay, thank you. And one more thing, is it because alcohol has anything to do with mutation, like gain in function mutation that leads to less number of genetic mutation in those who develop pancreatitis because of alcohol?
Sir, these are like multiple cofactors, and all of them act in concert. Like in SAPE hypothesis, the first patient with a risk factor has a first event, and this pancreas, there is increased susceptibility to environmental toxins. And if there are two individuals, one with genetic risk mutation, he is having higher susceptibility to alcohol mediated injury compared to another individual who does not have the genetic risk factors. So that way they have found that some mutations are found to be more common in alcoholic CP compared with non-alcoholic CP. That is how they have deciphered that there is some association between alcoholism and some genetic mutations.
So for example, in our study, 18% of patients with alcohol-related CP had SPINK1 mutation. So that's fairly high compared to 3% in the general population. Similarly, CFTR are also seen. So multiple factors actually lead to that.
Thank you.
But you know, one of the things which is still missing, apart from the PRSS1 mutation and to some extent CFTR, we really don't know the mechanism of cellular injury because of these mutations. So what he was referring to as the unfolded protein response syndrome or ER stress, that has been shown for some of the polymorphism, but not for others. So we really don't know what's the mechanism. So people believe that if you have a protein which is not properly manufactured, it will not be properly folded, because the folding response is as per the structure of the protein. And if it is not properly folded, it cannot be properly secreted out of the ER and packaged into the zymogen granules. And if that happens, then there is what is called as an unfolded protein response, which leads to endoplasmic reticulum stress. And what it does is there are three pathways there. It tries to shut down the protein manufacturing capability of the cell, also increases the formation of chaperones, which try and fold the proteins very well. But when this response is overwhelmed, because if there is more and more of UPR, this response is overwhelmed, then it leads to oxidative stress and inflammation. So that also is a missing link, how ER stress leads to oxidative stress and to cellular injury. So again, there is some missing link there. So we don't know how that happens. And the reason why it is important is because these are the pathways where one can try and act. So for example, we tried a couple of agents to decrease the UPR and improve ER stress in animal models. So one of the things that came out to be important was vitamin C. So vitamin C in our animal models at least showed that it decreased ER stress and decreased the severity of pancreatitis, which was a model of early chronic pancreatitis. So we don't know whether it will help in patients or not, but that is just one of the mechanisms. So the reason why people are studying more and more functional aspect of these genetic mutations is this, to find out if you have any drug which is available. For SPINK1, In US, there is a trial going on of camostrate mesylate, which is an oral antitrypsin. And I don't know whether it will be successful or not, but that is one trial which is going on in United States, a multi-center trial. The drug was first discovered in Japan. It's available there, but not used there. जतिन, तुम्हारी वॉइस में थोड़ा एंथुसियाज्म कम था, पेस भी थोड़ी स्लो थी, which is still okay. I mean, I can accept that pace to be a little slow, but you know this Khan Academy, जो बच्चे पढ़ते हैं Khan Academy, मैंने देखा है, उसमें there is an option of increasing the speed of that flow. So 1.25, 1.5 up to 2. So तो थोड़ा सा speed बढ़ानी चाहिए, बहुत हल्की सी, but enthusiasm is more important. You know, people should feel you are very enthusiastic about presenting your seminar. But it was overall good, exhaustive. Write a review article for tropical gastroenterology.
Sir, with this knowledge, as of now, should we really, out of research objective, should we really prescribe genetic testing for our clinic patients with idiopathic chronic pancreatitis?
So this is something that we have been trying for a while, and I said the reason why one can go for genetic testing is this, that you know, it gives kind of a, you know, some answer to the patient. They always keep asking you, what is the cause? You know, my son doesn't drink alcohol, he's not this, he's not that, there's nobody in the family, why has it got this? So sometimes it provides some answers to the family that, look, there is a cause, don't worry about this, don't go for NSE testing, and things will be okay. So that is the reason why I think in many of these patients, genetic testing for the common mutations may be advisable. And currently, I think there are multiple hospitals in the country which offer these genetic testing at least for 5, 6, 7 mutations. So we are currently developing, for example, a panel of many of these polymorphisms, see if we can, you know, offer these to patients. रेजिडेंट तो पूछते नहीं, क्वेश्चन क्यों नहीं पूछ रहे भाई? वो भी तुमने सारा पढ़ा दिया मुझे लग रहा है, तो वो पूछ ही नहीं रहे सवाल.
Nice.
चलो तो फिर अपना काम करो और क्या.
Okay.
सब लग रहा है घर बैठे हुए अपना ऐश कर रहे हैं, ब्रेकफास्ट करेंगे, फिर आराम जाएंगे 10-11 बजे.
Nice.
नहीं, कितने लोग हैं हॉस्पिटल में इस समय? जरा डॉक्टर साहब अटेंडेंस लगवाओ अभी.
Sir, almost everyone is there, sir. वो
अच्छा, ये समग्र है, ये
हाँ
लीडर
सर.
है, लीडर ऑफ द पैक है ये.
अरे नहीं सर.
चलो ठीक है, मजाक कर रहे हैं, ठीक है.
Yes, sir.
ओके,
Thank you, sir.
बाय.